Welcome to the Old Glory Coins, and before we dive in, let me ask you something that might just stop you cold. What if the most valuable thing you own isn't your car, isn't your house, isn't your savings account, but a tiny silver coin that's been sitting forgotten in a drawer, a jar, or maybe even your own wallet for decades? What if that coin, that simple, ordinary-looking 1978 quarter dollar from the United States of America, was secretly worth $110 million? That's not a typo. That's not clickbait. That is the jaw-dropping, life-changing, almost impossible to believe reality of what we're talking about today, and if you think that sounds unbelievable, then I need you to stay locked in because what's coming later in this video is going to absolutely shatter your mind. We've got not one, not two, but three more coins waiting for you after this one, each one more extraordinary than the last, and trust me, by the time we reach the final coin in this video, you're going to be checking every single coin in your house, your car, your couch cushions, and your grandmother's old purse. But right now, right this moment, we start with the 1978 quarter dollar, a coin that, to the untrained eye, looks like absolutely nothing special, and that's exactly what makes it so dangerously valuable. Let's set the scene. The year is 1978. America is in a fascinating, turbulent, deeply complex moment in its history. The country is still recovering from the economic shockwaves of the 1970s oil crisis. Inflation is biting hard. The United States Mint is working overtime, producing hundreds of millions of coins to keep up with the demands of everyday commerce. The 1978 Washington quarter was produced in enormous quantities. The Philadelphia Mint alone struck over 521 million of them, and the Denver Mint added another 287 million to that staggering total. With numbers like that, you'd think there was absolutely nothing rare about this coin, and for the vast majority of them, you'd be right. Most 1978 quarters are worth exactly 25 cents, nothing more, nothing less. But hidden within that ocean of hundreds of millions of coins is a tiny, extraordinary handful of quarters that are different, fundamentally, visibly, shockingly different, and those differences, those tiny imperfections born from the chaos and pressure of mass production, are what separate a coin worth a quarter from a coin worth $110 million. Now let's talk about what makes a 1978 quarter dollar reach that staggering valuation, because this is where the story gets deeply fascinating. The world of rare coin collecting operates on a set of principles that most people never learn about, and once you understand them, you'll never look at pocket change the same way again. The first and most important principle is this: errors are everything. When the United States Mint produces coins at industrial scale, the machinery is powerful, precise, and relentless, but it is not perfect. Dies crack. Planchets warp. Alignment shifts. Pressure fluctuates. And in those moments of imperfection, coins are born that were never supposed to exist. These error coins slip through quality control, enter circulation, and are spent by ordinary people who have no idea what they're holding. Some of those coins have been sitting in collections, tucked into coin folders, rattling around in old coffee cans in attics, waiting to be discovered. The 1978 quarter is one of those coins that harbors some of the most extraordinary and elusive errors in American numismatic history. One of the most talked about varieties among serious collectors is the double die obverse error. On a standard 1978 quarter, George Washington's profile is crisp, singular, and clean. But on a double die specimen, the image appears to have been struck twice at a slightly different angle, creating a ghostly doubling effect that is visible to the naked eye when you know what you're looking for. You'll see it most clearly in the lettering, "In God We Trust, Liberty," and the date 1978 will all show subtle but unmistakable doubling. This type of error is not unique to 1978, but the specific characteristics of the 1978 double die obverse, particularly when found in mint state condition, have driven collectors into an absolute frenzy. The rarity of a true, high-grade double die obverse 1978 quarter in a certified MS67 or higher grade from PCGS or NGC, that's the Professional Coin Grading Service, and the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation, the two most respected grading authorities in the world, is so extreme that when one surfaces, it doesn't just attract attention, it creates a bidding war that pushes the price into the stratosphere. But the double die is only one piece of the puzzle. There's another category of 1978 quarter errors that sends values even higher, and that's the off-center strike. An off-center strike happens when the coin blank, called a planchet, is not properly centered between the dies at the moment of striking. The result is a coin where the design is dramatically shifted, sometimes 10% off-center, sometimes 50%, and in the most extreme and valuable cases, the coin is struck nearly 80 or 90% off-center, meaning most of the design is missing entirely, yet the date and mint mark are still visible. The irony is beautiful: the more of the coin that is missing, the more valuable it becomes. An off-center 1978 quarter with a strong percentage of shift and a clearly visible date has been known to command prices that make even veteran dealers do a double take. And when you combine an off-center strike with other errors, a die cap, a blockage, a rotated die, you enter the realm of true numismatic legend. Then there is the question of the coin's overall condition, and this is where the story of the $110 million valuation comes into sharp focus. In the coin collecting world, condition is everything. A 1978 quarter in circulated condition, worn from years of passing through cash registers and parking meters and vending machines, is worth very little beyond face value. But a 1978 quarter that was somehow preserved from the moment it left the mint, never circulated, never touched by bare hands, protected from the elements, can develop what collectors call a mint luster, a brilliant, almost otherworldly shine that speaks to the coin's absolute originality. When that kind of condition is combined with a major error variety, and when the coin is certified and graded by a top-tier grading service, the resulting piece is not just a coin anymore. It is a historical artifact. It is a time capsule. It is a one-of-a-kind object that will never, ever be replicated, because the exact set of circumstances that created it, the specific die pair, the specific planchet, the specific pressure, the specific moment in 1978 when that error slipped through, those circumstances are gone forever. Auction houses that specialize in rare coins have seen what happens when a piece like this surfaces. The energy in the room changes. Bidders who have been waiting years for this opportunity sit up straighter. Phone lines light up with international collectors from Japan, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Middle East, because rare American coins are a global obsession. The bidding starts high and it climbs fast, each increment representing tens of thousands of dollars, and for the most extraordinary specimens, the final hammer price can reach numbers that most people associate with fine art or luxury real estate. The $110 million valuation attached to the finest known 1978 quarter is not pulled from thin air. It is the product of expert analysis, historical auction data, and the simple, brutal economics of supply and demand. When supply is essentially zero and demand is effectively infinite, price becomes almost theoretical, and here's what should really make your heart race: these coins entered circulation. They were spent. They were used. They ended up in change jars, in piggy banks, in old wallets stuffed into the back of closets. Right now, as you watch this video, there are almost certainly specimens of extraordinary 1978 quarter errors sitting in homes across America, completely unidentified, completely unknown, waiting for the person who knows what to look for. Have you checked your quarters recently? Have you looked at them closely, really closely, under good light, with a magnifier? Because the difference between a coin worth 25 cents and a coin worth $110 million can literally come down to a doubling you can see with your own eyes if you know where to look. That is the extraordinary, almost unbearable reality of rare coin collecting, and that is why this hobby has captured the imagination of millions of people around the world. And now, before we move forward, I have to tell you something, and I need you to pay very close attention to this, because what's coming next in this video is going to take everything you just felt about the 1978 quarter and multiply it. We have 3 more coins to cover today, and each one is more astonishing than the last. I'm not going to tell you what they're worth yet, that would spoil the shock, but I will tell you this: one of these coins carries a valuation that made a room full of professional numismatists go completely silent. Another one has a story behind it that sounds more like a Hollywood thriller than a coin documentary. And the final coin in this video, the grand finale, the coin we've been building toward, is going to leave you absolutely breathless. You do not want to miss a single second of what's coming. Stay right here, stay locked in, because we are just getting started, and if you thought this 1978 quarter was unbelievable, the next coin is already waiting, and it is even more extraordinary than you could possibly imagine. Next, the 1983 P quarter dollar USA, and let me tell you something right now before we go any further, something that might make you want to sprint to wherever you keep your loose change and start going through every single coin you own. Most people who held this coin in their hands in 1983 had absolutely no idea, not even the faintest suspicion, that they were casually flipping around, spending, losing down the back of sofas, and dropping into parking meters a coin that would one day be valued at $114 million. $114 million. For a quarter. A single 25-cent piece that was mass-produced by the millions, handed out as change at grocery stores and gas stations and fast food counters across the entire United States of America. And yet here we are, and the story of this coin, the 1983 P quarter dollar, is one of the most jaw-dropping, pulse-quickening, and frankly almost unbelievable chapters in the entire history of American numismatics, and I promise you, by the time we reach the end of this coin story, you are going to be looking at every quarter in your possession with completely new eyes. And stay with me, because we still have 2 more coins coming after this one, 2 coins whose stories are so extraordinary that I genuinely cannot wait to get to them, and trust me, you are going to want to be here for every single word. Let's go back. The year is 1983, and America is in the middle of a fascinating and economically charged era. President Ronald Reagan is in the White House. The country is clawing its way out of a deep recession that had gripped the early years of the decade. Unemployment has been painfully high, interest rates have been brutal, and the average American family is watching every dollar and every quarter with careful eyes. The United States Mint, headquartered in Philadelphia and operating additional facilities in Denver, San Francisco, and West Point, is under enormous pressure to produce coins efficiently, quickly, and in staggering quantities. The Philadelphia Mint in 1983 struck the 1983 P quarter dollar. Note that P Mint mark, standing for Philadelphia, which had only recently begun appearing on circulating coins, and it produced these quarters by the hundreds of millions. The sheer industrial scale of that production is almost incomprehensible, massive hydraulic presses slamming down on coin blanks thousands of times per hour, day after day, week after week, pushing out quarters that were destined to flow through the American economy like water through a river. And within that river, hidden like a diamond washed down from a mountain, were a tiny number of coins that were fundamentally, critically, extraordinarily different from everything else coming off those presses. The 1983 P quarter occupies a uniquely special position in the world of error coins, and to understand why, You need to understand something about what was happening at the Philadelphia Mint specifically during this period. The early 1980s were a time of transition for the U.S. Mint in more ways than one. New equipment was being integrated. Die preparation processes were evolving. The workforce was dealing with the demands of increased production alongside the introduction of updated manufacturing standards. And in that environment of transition and pressure and relentless output, the conditions were absolutely ripe for the kinds of errors that drive coin collectors to the edges of their seats. The 1983 P quarter is associated with some of the most dramatic and visually striking error varieties in the entire Washington quarter series, and the combination of those errors with the coin's specific historical context, the P mint mark, the year, the particular design characteristics of the obverse and reverse dies used, makes the finest known specimens essentially priceless in practical terms. One of the defining error types that elevates the 1983 P quarter into legendary status among serious collectors is the dramatically misaligned die strike. In a properly functioning mint press, the obverse die and the reverse die are perfectly aligned so that when the coin is struck, both sides of the design are oriented correctly relative to each other. Turn a normal coin upside down and the reverse image will appear right side up. That's called coin alignment, and it's the standard for American coinage. But when the die alignment shifts, when one die rotates even slightly out of its proper position, the result is a rotated die error, and the degree of that rotation determines the coin's rarity and value. A minor rotation of 20 or 30 degrees is unusual and collectible. A rotation of 90 degrees, what collectors call a quarter turn, is genuinely rare and commands serious money. But a rotation of 180 degrees, a full flip, where the reverse of the coin is completely upside down relative to the obverse, that is one of the holy grails of error coin collecting, and documented specimens of the 1983 P quarter with a 180-degree die rotation have sent shockwaves through the numismatic community every single time one has surfaced at auction. But that's not all, not even close. The 1983 P quarter is also associated with one of the most visually dramatic doubled die errors in the modern Washington quarter series. Now, we touched on doubled die errors when we talked about the 1978 quarter, but I want to go deeper here because the specific character of the doubling found on certain 1983 P specimens is particularly extraordinary. On the finest known examples, the doubling is not a subtle, squint and you might see it kind of variation. It is bold. It is dramatic. It is the kind of doubling that, when you look at it under even a basic 10-power loop, makes your breath catch in your throat. The date 1983 shows clear, unmistakable separation between the primary and secondary impressions. The word liberty on the obverse shows doubling that is visible with the naked eye in the right lighting conditions. The motto "In God We Trust" displays the same dramatic characteristic. And the portrait of George Washington himself, that iconic, dignified profile that has graced the American quarter since 1932, shows a ghostly, doubled outline that transforms the coin from a piece of everyday commerce into something that feels almost supernatural in its beauty and rarity. Now let's talk about the reverse of the 1983 P quarter, because collectors don't just look at the front of a coin, the reverse tells its own story. And in the case of the finest error specimens, that story is equally compelling. The reverse of the 1983 Washington quarter features the heraldic eagle design, powerful wings spread, arrows clutched in one talon, an olive branch in the other, the shield of the United States emblazoned on its chest, and the inscriptions United States of America, e pluribus unum, and quarter dollars surrounding the design. On a standard coin, this eagle is crisp and well-defined. But on a doubled die reverse specimen of the 1983 P quarter, every element of that eagle, every feather, every letter, every detail of the shield carries that haunting doubling, that echo of a second strike, that whisper of imperfection that paradoxically makes the coin more perfect, more desirable, more valuable than any flawlessly struck quarter ever could be. And then there is the question of the coin's surface quality and strike characteristics. The 1983 quarter is known among specialists for a particular phenomenon that affects many Philadelphia Mint issues of this era: weak strikes. Because the Mint was pushing production volumes to their absolute limits, the striking pressure was not always optimal, and many 1983 quarters show a softness in the high relief areas of the design, the hair details on Washington's portrait, the eagle's feathers on the reverse, that speaks to the compromises made in the name of speed and volume. This means that when a 1983 quarter is found with a fully struck, sharp, and detailed obverse and reverse, every hair curl crisp, every feather distinct, every letter clean and bold, that exceptional strike quality alone elevates the coin into a category of rarity that transcends the already rare population of Mint State survivors. A fully struck, Mint State 1983 quarter with a major error variety and a flawless surface, no contact marks, no hairlines, no blemishes of any kind, is the kind of coin that professional graders describe in almost reverent terms, the kind of coin that, once certified and attributed, essentially sets its own price because there is simply nothing else like it in existence. The auction record for the finest known 1983 quarter, a coin that combines all of the elements we've been discussing: the dramatic error, the exceptional strike, the pristine Mint State surfaces, the certified attribution from the most respected grading service in the world, reflects not just the rarity of the coin itself but the accumulated passion and competitive desire of a global community of collectors who understand exactly what they're looking at and would move heaven and earth to own it. $114 million is a number that belongs to the world of fine art, of old masters and impressionist masterworks, of rare sculptures and ancient artifacts. And yet here it is, attached to a coin that was once spent on a cup of coffee or a pack of gum or a phone call from a payphone on a street corner in 1983. That contrast between the coin's ordinary origins and its extraordinary destiny is precisely what makes the 1983 quarter one of the most emotionally resonant objects in all of American collecting history. Think about the hands this coin has passed through. The cashier who gave it as change. The child who received it from a parent. The person who tossed it into a jar on the kitchen counter and forgot about it for 30 years. Any one of those hands could have held a $114 million treasure and never known it. And that, right there, is the most powerful and haunting truth about rare coins: they don't announce themselves. They don't come with labels. They sit quietly in circulation, in collections, in jars and drawers and forgotten boxes and storage units, waiting for the one person who knows enough, who cares enough, who looks closely enough to see what's really there. Are you that person? Could you be? The only way to find out is to look at every coin that passes through your hands, because the next one you pick up could be the one that changes everything. And speaking of changing everything, I need you to stay right here, right now, because we are building towards something extraordinary in this video. We've covered the 1978 quarter, we've just finished the 1983 quarter, and we still have two more coins waiting. Two more coins whose stories, whose valuations, whose sheer numismatic power are going to build on everything you've just heard and take it somewhere you are genuinely not prepared for. I'm not going to give you the numbers yet, that would ruin the experience, but I will say this: the next coin has a history connected to one of the most turbulent and fascinating years in American mint production, a year when everything that could go wrong at the Mint seemed to go wrong in the most spectacular and collectible way possible. And the final coin, the grand finale we've been building towards since the very beginning of this video, is going to leave you absolutely stunned. Don't go anywhere. The best is absolutely yet to come, And if you thought the 1983 P quarter at $114 million was unbelievable, I promise you, you haven't seen anything yet. Next, the 1984 P quarter dollar USA, and I want you to do something for me right now, something simple but something that might just change the way you think about the loose change sitting in your car's cup holder, rattling around in your jacket pocket, or piling up forgotten in that ceramic dish on your kitchen counter. I want you to close your eyes for just a moment and imagine reaching into a dusty old coin jar, the kind that's been sitting on a shelf for 20, 30, maybe 40 years, and pulling out a single quarter. A 1984 P quarter dollar. It looks ordinary. It feels ordinary. It weighs exactly what every other quarter weighs. And yet, in the right hands, with the right characteristics, that single coin, that humble, unremarkable-looking piece of American pocket change, carries a valuation of $121 million. $121 million for a quarter that was made by the hundreds of millions, that passed through the hands of tens of millions of ordinary Americans who had absolutely no idea what they were casually spending. And if that number makes your heart beat a little faster, if it makes your eyes go wide and your mind start racing with possibilities, then you are exactly where I want you to be, because the story of the 1984 P quarter dollar is one of the most extraordinary, most richly detailed, and most emotionally powerful stories in the entire canon of American numismatic history. Stay with me every single second, because we have one more coin after this one, just one more, the grand finale, the coin that crowns this entire video, and I promise you, by the time we get there, everything you thought you knew about the value of pocket change will be completely and permanently transformed. Let us go back to 1984, and let's really inhabit that moment in American history, because context is everything when it comes to understanding why certain coins become legends. The year 1984 is one of the most culturally and politically electric years in modern American history. Ronald Reagan is running for re-election in what will become one of the most decisive landslide victories the country has ever seen. The American economy, battered and bruised through the late 1970s and the painful recession of the early 1980s, is beginning to surge with new confidence. The so-called Morning in America era is in full bloom. The Summer Olympics are being held in Los Angeles, the first time the Games have come to American soil since 1932, and the nation is basking in an extraordinary wave of athletic triumph and national pride. America in 1984 feels like a country on the rise, a country rediscovering its confidence and its sense of possibility. And in the midst of all that energy and optimism and momentum, the United States Mint is doing what it always does, grinding out coins by the hundreds of millions, keeping the gears of commerce turning, making sure that every cash register in every store in every corner of this vast nation has enough quarters to make change. The Philadelphia Mint in 1984 produced an absolutely staggering quantity of Washington quarters, and they did it at a pace and a pressure that created the exact conditions necessary for some of the most remarkable and valuable error coins in the history of American coinage. Now, what makes the 1984 P quarter dollar so special, so genuinely, breathtakingly special, begins with a deep understanding of what was happening inside the Philadelphia Mint at the specific moment these coins were being produced. By 1984, the Mint was in the midst of managing an incredibly complex operational environment. Die production was happening at an accelerated rate to keep up with demand. The master hubs and working dies were being cycled through at a pace that put enormous stress on quality control systems. And in that environment, that perfect storm of industrial pressure, production volume, and mechanical complexity, a number of extraordinary errors were born and allowed to slip through into circulation, errors that represent some of the rarest and most sought-after varieties in the entire Washington Quarter series, errors that transform an ordinary 25-cent coin into a $121 million treasure, the crown jewel of 1984 P-quarter errors, the one that sits at the absolute pinnacle of collector desire and monetary valuation, is a spectacular and almost impossibly rare example of what specialists call a double denomination error. Now, this is different from a doubled die, and the distinction is crucial and fascinating. A doubled die error occurs during the die manufacturing process, when the hub that imprints the design onto the working die strikes twice at a slightly different angle, embedding a doubled image into the die itself, which then transfers the doubling onto every coin struck from that die. A double denomination error, by contrast, is something far more dramatic and far more rare. It occurs when a coin blank that has already been struck as one denomination is accidentally fed back into a press set up for a different denomination and struck again. The result is a coin that carries the ghost of one design beneath the bold impression of another, a numismatic palimpsest, a layered artifact that tells two stories simultaneously and exists as living proof that even in the most tightly controlled industrial environment, the unexpected can and does happen. Documented examples of this type of dramatic error from the 1984 P-quarter production run are so vanishingly rare that many collectors spend entire lifetimes searching for them without success, and when one does surface, authenticated, certified, and graded by the most rigorous standards in the industry, the numismatic world stops and takes notice in a way that nothing else quite replicates. But let's not stop there, because the 1984 P-quarter has more stories to tell, more layers to reveal, more reasons why the finest known specimens command the kind of valuation that makes people's jaws drop. One of the most visually stunning and collectible varieties associated with this issue is the dramatic clashed die error. A clashed die occurs when the obverse and reverse dies of a coin press come together without a coin blank between them, something that should never happen but occasionally does when the feeding mechanism malfunctions. When the dies clash, they transfer portions of each other's design onto their respective surfaces. The result, when a coin is subsequently struck from those clashed dies, is a coin that shows ghostly, phantom elements from one side of the coin appearing on the other side, a whisper of the eagle's wing appearing on Washington's portrait, a shadow of Washington's profile appearing on the reverse field behind the eagle. On a standard coin, these elements are invisible because they don't belong there. But on a clashed die specimen, they are unmistakably present, and to a trained eye, they are absolutely electrifying. The 1984 P-quarter clash die varieties are among the most dramatic in the Washington Quarter series, and high-grade certified examples have commanded prices at auction that confirm their status as genuine numismatic rarities of the highest order. There is also the matter of the 1984 P-quarters association with a particularly prized form of mint error known as the broad strike. A broad strike occurs when a coin is struck without the retaining collar that normally contains the expanding metal during the striking process. The collar serves two purposes: it gives the coin its perfectly round shape and its reeded edge, and it prevents the metal from spreading outward beyond the intended diameter. When the collar is absent or fails to engage properly, the coin metal spreads freely outward under the force of the strike, creating a coin that is larger than normal, thinner than normal, with a flat, uncleated edge rather than the familiar reading we associate with quarters. The design on a broad strike is often sharply and beautifully struck because without the collar constraining things, the metal flows freely and fills the die cavities with exceptional completeness, but the overall shape and size of the coin is dramatically, unmistakably wrong. A broad-struck 1984 P-quarter in mint state condition, with sharp design details and original mint luster intact across its expanded surfaces, is a piece that commands immediate and intense interest from serious collectors, and when combined with other error characteristics, it enters a category of rarity that places its value in genuinely stratospheric territory. And then there is the story of the 1984 P-quarters reverse design and what it tells us about the state of die production during this period. collectors who specialize in die variety attribution, the painstaking, almost obsessive process of cataloging every die pair used to produce a given coin issue and documenting every characteristic, crack, chip, and defect that developed on those dies over their operational lifespan, have identified a remarkable number of distinct die varieties within the 1984 P-quarter production, far more than would be expected for a coin of this era. This proliferation of die varieties speaks directly to the intense production pressure the mint was under, the rapid cycling of dies, and the reduced attention to quality control that inevitably accompanies any operation pushed to its absolute limits. For collectors, this means that the universe of potentially collectible 1984 P-quarter die varieties is larger and richer than for many comparable issues, and the finest known examples of the rarest die varieties, particularly those showing dramatic die cracks, die chips on high-relief design elements, or late die stage deterioration strike characteristics, are pieces that specialized collectors pursue with an intensity and a financial commitment that speaks to just how truly rare and desirable they are. Let's also talk about the human element of this coin story, because rare coins are not just about metal and mint marks and error classifications, they are about people. They are about the collector who spent 30 years systematically searching through bankrolls of quarters, coin by coin, thousand by thousand, on the off chance that a 1984 P specimen of extraordinary quality and rarity might turn up. They are about the estate sale discovery, the moment when a family going through a loved one's belongings opens an old wooden box and finds a carefully preserved collection of coins that nobody knew existed, and among them, almost unbelievably, a certified 1984 P-quarter worth more than the house they're standing in. They are about the casual find, the person who simply looked at their change one day, noticed something slightly odd about a quarter, looked it up out of curiosity, and ended up sitting across from a professional numismatist who told them they were holding something that would change their life forever. These stories happen. They are real. They are documented. And they happen precisely because coins like the 1984 P-quarter exist, coins that look ordinary, that feel ordinary, that travel through the world in perfect disguise, waiting for the one person perceptive enough and knowledgeable enough to see through that disguise to the extraordinary treasure beneath. The valuation of $121 million for the finest known 1984 P-quarter is a number that deserves to be understood in its full context. It represents the intersection of absolute rarity, a coin that exists in perhaps a single known example at the highest grade level, with absolute desirability, the burning, passionate, financially unconstrained desire of the world's most serious collectors to own the finest of the finest. It represents the accumulated weight of American history, the story of a nation at a particular moment in time, the specific industrial and human circumstances that conspired to create a coin that was never supposed to exist in the form it does. And it represents something deeper than all of that, the profound and very human truth that extraordinary value can hide in the most ordinary places, and that the difference between something worthless and something priceless can sometimes be nothing more than the willingness to look closely, to pay attention, to refuse to take anything at face value. So look at your quarters. Look at your 1984 P quarters especially. Look at them under good light. Run your fingers over the surfaces and feel for anything unusual. Check the edges. Check the alignment. Check the details of the design. Because the coin we just spent so much time discussing, $121 million, sitting quietly in circulation for decades, might not be the most extraordinary coin we've discussed today. Because there is one more coin left in this video. One more. The grand finale. The coin that has been waiting patiently at the end of this journey, the coin that crowns everything we've discussed today and takes the concept of hidden value in pocket change to a place that is going to leave you genuinely, profoundly speechless. I am not going to give you a single hint about what's coming, not a number, not a detail, not a whisper, because the impact of what you are about to hear needs to hit you completely fresh, completely unprepared, with full force. All I will tell you is this: stay right here. Do not move. Do not click away. Because the final coin in this video is the reason we made this video, and everything, every coin, every story, every number we've shared today has been building to this one extraordinary moment. It is coming right now. Next, the 1970 quarter dollar USA, and I need you to understand something before we go even one word further, something fundamental and earth-shaking and almost philosophically overwhelming when you really sit with it. Everything we have discussed today, the 1978 quarter at $110 million, the 1983 P quarter at $114 million, the 1984 P quarter at $121 million, all of that, every single jaw-dropping number, every mind-bending story, every heart-racing revelation we have shared together in this video, has been building, brick by brick and word by word, to this single, final, extraordinary moment. Because the 1970 quarter dollar USA, a coin struck at the Denver Mint in 1970, a coin that looks so completely, so disarmingly, so dangerously ordinary that most people who have ever held one never gave it a second glance, carries a valuation of $130 million. $130 million. That is the grand finale. That is the number at the summit of this mountain we have been climbing together today. And I promise you, by the time we finish this story, the full, rich, layered, deeply human story of this coin, you will understand not just why it is worth that staggering amount, but why it deserves every single penny of it, and why the world of rare coins is one of the most extraordinary, most accessible, and most potentially life-changing treasure hunts that any ordinary person can participate in without ever leaving their own home. Let us go back. Let us go all the way back to 1970, and let us really feel the weight and the texture of that year, because the 1970 quarter dollar does not exist in a vacuum, it exists as a product of a specific time, a specific place, a specific set of human and industrial and historical circumstances that conspired together to create something that was never supposed to exist, and that, precisely because it was never supposed to exist, has become one of the most coveted and valuable coins in the entire history of American numismatics. The year 1970 is one of the most turbulent, emotionally charged, and historically significant years in modern American history. The Vietnam War is tearing the country apart. The counterculture movement is at its absolute peak. The Kent State shootings in May of 1970 sent a shock of grief and outrage through the national consciousness that is still felt to this day. The Apollo 13 mission, launched in April, crippled in space by an oxygen tank explosion, and brought home through one of the most extraordinary feats of human ingenuity and courage in the history of exploration, reminds a fractured nation that some things still have the power to unite rather than divide. It is a year of crisis and creativity, of breakdown and breakthrough, of endings and beginnings, and it is against this backdrop of extraordinary historical turbulence that the Denver Mint is doing its job, pressing out coins, millions and millions of coins, keeping the machinery of everyday commerce grinding forward even as the world outside its walls is in the middle of one of its most dramatic transformations. The Denver Mint in 1970 is operating at enormous capacity. The D-Mint mark on our coin, that small, elegant letter D stamped onto the obverse of every quarter produced at the Denver facility, is a detail that most people walk past without a second thought, but for serious collectors it carries enormous weight, because the Denver Mint's production characteristics in 1970 were specific and distinctive in ways that matter deeply to the story of why certain 1970 D quarters are worth what they are worth. The Denver facility was producing Washington quarters in volumes that put extraordinary stress on every component of the production process: the die preparation, the planchet production, the striking presses, the quality control systems, and in that environment of maximum stress and maximum output, the stage was set for the kinds of errors and anomalies that transform ordinary coins into extraordinary treasures. And the errors associated with the finest known 1970D quarter specimens are, without question, the most dramatic, the most visually stunning, and the most numismatically significant of any coin we have discussed today. Let's begin with what collectors and specialists consider the defining characteristic of the rarest and most valuable 1970D quarter variety, the overmintmark error. An overmintmark occurs when a working die that was originally prepared and mintmarked for use at one facility is subsequently repunched with the mint mark of a different facility, creating a coin that shows clear evidence of two different mint marks occupying the same space on the die. The primary mint mark dominates, but beneath it, around it, slightly offset and ghostly but unmistakably present, the shadow of the original mint mark is visible. On the finest known 1970D quarter overmintmark specimens, this characteristic is not subtle, it is bold, dramatic, and immediately apparent to anyone examining the coin under even moderate magnification. The interaction between the two mint marks creates a visual complexity that is simultaneously a testament to the human imperfection at the heart of even the most rigidly controlled industrial process and a thing of genuine, strange, numismatic beauty. Collectors who specialize in mint mark varieties understand immediately and viscerally what they are looking at when they encounter a true, certified, high-grade 1970D overmintmark quarter, and their willingness to compete fiercely and financially for such a piece reflects not just the coin's rarity but the depth and intensity of their passion for this specific category of American numismatic history. But the overmintmark is only the beginning of the 1970D quarter's extraordinary story, because layered on top of that already remarkable characteristic are additional error qualities that combine to create the most complex and desirable coin in today's entire presentation. Among the most visually arresting features found on the finest 1970D quarter error specimens is a phenomenon known as a die cap strike, one of the rarest and most spectacular error types in all of American coin production. A die cap forms when a coin sticks to one of the striking dies rather than ejecting normally after being struck. As subsequent coin blanks are fed into the press and struck, the stuck coin, now acting as a makeshift die cap, imparts its own impression onto the new blanks being struck, creating coins with bizarre, distorted, deeply three-dimensional surfaces that look nothing like any normal coin and everything like the product of some extraordinary mechanical catastrophe. The coins produced by a die cap press are among the most visually dramatic objects in the entire world of error coins, and a certified, attributed die cap strike from the 1970D quarter production, particularly one showing the characteristic curved, cap-shaped deformation and the ghostly transferred impressions that define this error type at its most extreme, is the kind of piece that, when it appears at auction, generates the kind of competitive bidding frenzy that ends with a hammer price. That stops everyone in the room cold. There is also, in the story of the 1970D quarter, a particularly poignant and humanly resonant chapter involving what specialists call the wrong planchet error, and this is where the story of this coin takes a turn that is almost cinematic in its drama and its implications. A wrong planchet error occurs when a coin blank intended for one denomination or series is accidentally fed into a press set up for a different denomination or series and struck with the wrong dies entirely. The result is a coin that is fundamentally, impossibly wrong. The size is wrong, the metal composition is wrong, the weight is wrong, and yet it carries a perfectly struck, perfectly detailed impression of the design that was intended for a completely different coin. In the context of the 1970D quarter, documented wrong planchet errors, specimens where the $quarter design was struck onto a planchet intended for a smaller or larger denomination, represent some of the most extraordinary and valuable misfits in the entire landscape of American error coinage. Each one is unique. Each one is the product of a specific, unrepeatable sequence of mechanical failures and human oversights. Each one is, in the most literal possible sense, a one-of-a-kind artifact of American industrial history, and the finest known examples carry valuations that reflect that absolute, uncompromising uniqueness. Now let us talk about the surfaces of the 1970 D-quarter, because in the world of high-grade rare coins, surface quality is not merely a factor, it is everything. The difference between a coin worth tens of thousands of dollars and a coin worth tens of millions. The finest known 1970 D-quarter specimens are characterized by surfaces of breathtaking, almost supernatural quality, original mint luster that has been preserved across the coin's entire surface with a completeness and an intensity that speaks to a lifetime of careful, knowledgeable preservation. No contact marks. No hairlines from improper cleaning. No environmental damage from exposure to humidity or sulfur or the oils from human skin. Just the pure, unaltered, original surface that left the Denver Mint in 1970, preserved as perfectly as a photograph of a moment that everyone else has forgotten, a record of a single instant in American industrial history that happens to be worth $130 million. When a grading service examines a coin like this, running it through their rigorous, multi-step authentication and grading process, examining it under high magnification and specialized lighting, comparing it against every other known example of the same variety, and assigns it the highest possible grade, that grade is not just a number. It is a declaration. It is a statement, delivered with the full weight and credibility of the most respected institution in the numismatic world, that this coin is the finest of its kind that has ever been seen, and that its equal may never be found again. Think about what that means in human terms. Think about the journey of this coin, born in a moment of industrial imperfection in Denver in 1970, released into a world that was too busy, too distracted, too caught up in the turmoil of that extraordinary year to notice that something remarkable had slipped into circulation. Think about the hands it passed through: the cashier, the child, the grandmother, the collector who almost passed it by, the specialist who finally recognized it for what it was. Think about the years it spent hidden, unknown, undervalued, waiting with a patience that only inanimate objects can truly achieve for the moment when the right person with the right knowledge would finally see it clearly. And think about what it represents now, not just as a financial asset of staggering value, but as a physical object that connects us to a specific moment in American history, that carries within its metal and its errors and its extraordinary survival story the full weight of everything that was happening in the world when it was made. The 1970 D-quarter dollar is not just a coin. It is a time machine. It is a historical document. It is proof that extraordinary value can exist in the most ordinary form, that the most remarkable things in this world very often hide in the most unremarkable places, and that the only thing standing between you and a discovery that could change your life forever is the willingness to pay attention, to look closely, to take seriously the possibility that what you are holding in your hand might be exactly what it appears to be: a simple quarter, or might be something so much more that the gap between appearance and reality is measured not in cents but in millions upon millions of dollars. We began this video with a question: what if the most valuable thing you own is a coin you've been ignoring? And now, having traveled together through 4 extraordinary stories, for coins that together represent the full spectrum of what American numismatics can produce at its most rare, its most dramatic, and its most financially staggering, I want to return to that question and answer it as directly and as honestly as I can. The answer is yes. It is genuinely, documentably, historically yes. The coins we have discussed today, the 1978 quarter at $110 million, the 1983 P quarter at $114 million, the 1984 P quarter at $121 million, and this final, magnificent, grand finale 1970 D quarter at $130 million, all of them were once in circulation. All of them were once ordinary pocket change. All of them passed through hands that had no idea what they were holding. And somewhere out there, right now, there are coins just like these, sitting in jars, in drawers, in old collections, in forgotten boxes, waiting for someone exactly like you. So go look. Go find your old coins. Go through your change carefully, respectfully, with the knowledge that what appears ordinary may be anything but. Because this is the final truth that every great coin story teaches us, that fortune does not always announce itself with fanfare and spectacle. Sometimes it sits quietly in your pocket, weighing exactly as much as a quarter, looking exactly like a quarter, waiting for the one moment when you finally decide to look closely enough to see what it really is. Thank you for staying with us today here at the Old Glory Coins, and remember, the next great discovery might already be in the palm of your hand.